Good evening, and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and during these half-hour programs, I'll be interviewing writers about their careers in writing, their craft, their ambitions in writing. They might be poets, they might be graffiti writers, they might be nonfiction writers, they might be journalists. We plan to cast a very, very wide net. We'll be sharing information, of course, on the Writer's Block, but we hope to have a good time doing it as well. The show will be varied, and it'll be open to your comments. If you have an idea for us here at the Writer's Block, or if you'd like to be on the Writer's Block, please watch for our address at the end of the program. Tonight's guest is Susan Jhirad. She's both a poet and a freelance writer. Her background in academia includes a PhD in Romance languages from Harvard, and at present she's a professor at North Shore Community College in English. She has written poetry, fiction, movie reviews, and screenplays. Her work has appeared in Ms. Magazine, as well as Sojourner and Cineast, and she's a former editor of In Print, which is the faculty literary magazine at North Shore Community College. Let's go over now and talk to Susan. Hello, how are you? I'm glad you came. I know you've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Like the plague.
Like the plague. How did I do on Cineast?
Beautiful. Excellent. Better than they pronounce it.
Did I get than the French?
No,
or the people?
The editors of the magazine who speak French.
What's Cineast mean?
Someone who is a specialist in the cinema.
A little more than a buff and a little less than auteur,
yeah,
somewhere in there?
That's right.
Since we started on Cineast, can you tell me what you've done for Sojourner in the way of movie reviews and for Cineast?
Several years ago, my career as a movie reviewer started, as most of my writing did, out of extreme passion. In this case, it was hatred for a movie called Flashdance, which was about a woman welder who welds by day and ballet dances at night. I thought this movie was so phony and despicable that I was prompted to take pen in hand and write a movie review for Sojourner, and then I started for a couple of years writing reviews for Sojourner. After that, a friend of mine who wrote for Cineast suggested that I send some reviews to Cineast, and I started writing for them on a fairly regular basis, which I've done pretty much up to the present.
Was the Flashdance review accepted?
Yes, oh yes, yes.
I don't think Flashdance got any award nominations, did it?
I don't know. It was a very popular movie.
It was. I remember I saw it.
Very popular. Yeah.
It wasn't your realistic movie.
No.
As fantasy as Pretty Woman, perhaps?
Right.
The
ultimate message was sleep with your boss and get ahead, and also that it's possible to weld all day and still have enough physical energy to do professional ballet dancing, you know, which is kind of ludicrous, since I was a welder myself, which you didn't mention, for 2 years.
You didn't put it in your...
I didn't put it on my resume. I know how you feel after 8 hours of welding, and you don't feel like doing ballet dance.
Since you wanted to mention that, where did you weld? When did you weld?
I welded at the Quincy shipyard for 2 years, and that was part of 8 years of working in various factories that I did as part of my political life, which is also part of my writing.
And we can put this on record now on videotape that when you're welding for 8 hours, you don't feel like dancing in a disco for 5 more hours.
You don't feel like sleeping with your boss either. Most of my bosses were pretty despicable, but I hope none of them are watching this show.
We'll edit that out.
Okay, you can edit that out.
Why did you, now I asked this in a specific way, how you got into film specifically. You hated a movie.
Yeah.
What are your memories as a child of movies? You must have a love for movies. Yeah. Basically, if you write about them, you see them a lot. I know you use them in teaching. What formed that when you were small?
Well, I've always been fascinated with movies, but also with the theater in general. I did a lot of acting when I was a little girl. I was fortunate enough to be part of to go to an art school, starting when I was about 8 years old, which did a lot of children's theater, and I was completely enthralled with the theater, so that was part of the whole thing, and have been too. I still love theater, and that's connected with my love of movies too.
Do you do theater reviews as well?
No. No reason. It just hasn't happened.
We haven't had a writer on before who did movie reviews or screenplays, so I'm going to stick with that for a little bit.
Okay.
What movies have you reviewed lately, or what movies would you like to review?
Well, I did a review of Camille Claudel, which is in the position of cineast, and that's kind of interesting because it was a bit of a conflict of interest for me, and I was afraid maybe that I shouldn't do it. I asked the editors. They had sent me a list of movies that they wanted me to think about reviewing. The reason it was a conflict of interest was that I had written my own screenplay for Camille Claudel, unknowing of the fact that the movie was being produced simultaneously in France. And I completed the screenplay and was, after months and months of kind of sleeping and dreaming and obsessing about Camille Claudel and doing all sorts of research, I finally finished the screenplay, which I thought was one of the better things I had ever written, and then called a friend of mine to see how I could market it. And this is a woman who also had made a film in France, and she said that movie has just been made in France. So that was one of the many heartbreaking experiences. But after that, I did see the movie with my heart kind of in my throat, and I wondered if I should write a review, but I said I didn't know a lot about the subject, so I thought, you know, it was worthwhile after doing all that research. At least I could do something with it.
Did you write your screenplay in English or French?
I wrote it in English. No, I don't feel capable of writing a screenplay in French at this point. I wrote it in English, and my idea was that, you know, if someone were interested, it would be made in France. Actually, I think the woman who wrote the screenplay was an American. This is discouraging, but I heard that somewhere, and her name was Marilyn Golden or something like that, the woman who wrote the screenplay for the French movie.
It doesn't sound very French, that name.
No.
I wonder if we could hold this up. I just want to show the audience the format. They might not be familiar with the magazine. Try to hold that without. Is there a lot of glare there? Cineaste is C-I-N-E-A-S-T-E. And this is one of the publications you've written for. Mm-hmm. What do you think about movies in general now? It's a nice topic.
Big topic. Well, I see a lot that I enjoy, but very few that I really love. I mean, I guess my main interest right now, which is why I'm working on, or I finished the screenplay that I just did, is that I feel the image of women in movies is pretty despicable. I mean, the roles kind of, at this point, have gotten worse and worse. There was a kind of brief period of female heroines in the late 70s and early 80s, and now the role seems to be, like in Pretty Woman, you know, kind of either prostitutes or women who sleep with their boss to get ahead, or bimbos, generally. I think it's really fair to say that the majority of women in films are bimbos. They're kind of flat, one-dimensional characters for the most part. And so I feel there are all these wonderful women characters through history. And after writing about Camille Claudel, who certainly was one of those great characters, I decided to write a screenplay about Maud Gunn, who is one of the most fascinating women in world history, in my opinion, my humble opinion.
It's great love.
Yes, Yeats is great love, but also quite a person in her own right.
So you would not be favorable, I would guess, to one of the big recent raves, Dances with Wolves.
Actually, I like Dances with Wolves. I liked it only because I spent my entire childhood, speaking of my childhood, I spent my whole childhood every Saturday going to the cowboy and Indian movies for 25 cents with my best friend Jeffrey Crew, and absolutely loving them, of course, and only realizing later on how racist they were. Dances with Wolves was very hokey, and it's true Kevin Costner's hair always looked as if it was blow-dried, but beyond,
it was blow-dried.
Beyond that, it was quite moving, and the physical images of the desert I thought were really beautiful, and it was just nice sitting in a movie and having people root for the Indians while they were killing the cavalry, instead of the other way around for a change. So, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it.
I had the same reaction. There's much in the movie that doesn't bear a great deal of thought, but it's fun. It's really wonderful.
It is.
Quintessential Hollywood. Great fun, I thought.
Yeah, and it wasn't boring. I mean, it was a 3-hour movie, but it never seemed to lag. I mean, I found myself totally caught up in it.
I've read recently that the full movie may be released, which is 4 or 4.5 hours.
Well,
I was struck at how comfortable I was all through the movie.
Yeah.
I didn't get numb, and have to start shifting around. Let's leave film for a second. I want to go to, well, not leave film, but go to the production side of film.
Mm-hmm.
You're writing, or you've just finished a screenplay.
Right.
Can you tell us something about that and what plans you have for it?
Well, I completed the screenplay, and I was fortunate enough, I thought, to find an agent in Hollywood, which is difficult to do, who liked it and wanted to try to sell it. Unfortunately, I just found out 2 days ago that she's been laid off, so the economic crisis seems to be hitting even out as far as Hollywood goes. She also told me that she sent it to a few places that had turned it down. She hadn't sent it to that many yet, but she said at the moment the mood in Hollywood, because of the state of the economy and the general mood in the country, is towards light romantic comedies. People don't want anything that's too heavy or realistic. Actually, I think the story of Maud Gunn and William Butler Yeats in some ways could be a kind of romantic escape film from at least the present. But at the moment, I'm trying some other avenues. I don't know. I probably should say right now what avenues I'm trying, but I'm going to try to get another agent. I'm going to try.
The screenplay that's finished is the Yeats.
That's the one about
Gunn.
Yeats and Maud Gunn, right? And
that's not light romantic comedy.
It's not light romantic comedy, and my agent told me that she thought it's a movie that would be made as is in Europe, but as far as America goes, they wanted it to focus even more on the love affair between Maud Gunn and Yeats, and less on her sort of other dimensions, her politics and her...
Is there an indigenous film industry in Ireland? Do you know?
Well, it's starting, I think. I mean, the whole thing that happened with Jim Sheridan's direction of My Left Foot, which was wonderful, brought an interest in Irish films and Irish directors, and he just directed the film The Field, which was, I thought, a good film, even though it had some flaws to it. So one of the people I have been trying to get my screenplay to, I'm not 100% clear whether it ever, I don't think it got to him yet, he's sort of on that list, was Sheridan, who recently signed a contract with Universal to make a number of films on Irish subjects. So I was kind of hoping that someone like him, who would conceive, who would make it in Ireland anyway. With
Well, it's not going to be Hollywood studio films
fantasy.
about Ireland, is it?
That's my fantasy. That's my fantasy. So I
don't.
You
could send it to the president, whose name I'm forgetting right now. Who's the new president? Mrs. Robinson.
Oh.
Maybe.
Mrs. Robinson.
The president
of
Ireland.
Of Ireland. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
She might be open to something like
great.
that. Yeah. Okay, now let's leave film for at least temporarily.
It's a heartbreaking story, as you all know. As everybody knows, writing film scripts and trying to get anybody to buy them is, like a chance in a million. And there's thousands of scripts out there. There's some very good scripts out there, and there's some very terrible ones.
And many of the terrible ones get produced.
Many of the terrible ones, as we all know, get produced. Right.
I've been seeing a lot of movies lately. I wanted to open with some movie discussion. Let's go over now to writing, non-screenplay writing. You've written poetry a good deal. I've read some of it. It's very good. Where has that been?
Just in small magazines and things. I haven't, truthfully, most of my poetry I've written for myself. I haven't really written it so much for publication. That's true. I've written it, and it's kind of personal. I also tend to write it sporadically rather than in any kind of continuous way, so I don't accumulate a body of poetry, in any given period of time. When I was younger, I wrote more poetry than I write now.
Is that because you're too busy or because your interests have changed? I know you teach poetry.
Yeah. I don't know, different kinds of writing. I don't know all the reasons why, but I've leaned towards different types of writing at different periods of my life. When I was younger, I leaned towards poetry more. I guess because it was more involved with very intense personal emotions. And then after I came out of a long period of doing political work, I was trying to kind of put all of that together. I started writing fiction, autobiography, and I wrote a novel. I wrote a novel about my work in the shipyard, actually, which I never succeeded in getting published. And I started writing short stories and working on the craft of short story writing, and liked that a lot. I love short stories, and I like to write them too. And then, as I said, I sort of slipped into movie reviewing through just my general love of movies, and then decided to try to write a screenplay and see, what it was like, and I really enjoyed the form. In some ways, it's obviously a lot easier than writing a novel. It doesn't take years of your life, for one thing. But there is a craft to it, and I started out cold, really not understanding things about the craft, and then later, actually took a brief course. Someone kind of realized the whole structure of screenplays, the 3-act structure, was really important. That it's not just enough to have a good idea or a good theme. You really have to have a very tight storyline to make a movie work. You're working within the time limits, and you're also working visually, which is different from novel writing, even playwriting, because so much of what makes a movie great is not actually ever spoken at all in words. It's all it's visual. It's an art form.
If it's good, yeah.
If it's good,
yeah.
Right.
I think that's a nice, close, formalistic connection between the short story that you were interested in and wrote, and film, and films are essentially short stories, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, and I'm better at that. I'm not really. I think, I'm better at things that take brief, intense periods of time. It's just more in my nature than something that's drawn out over a long period of time.
That would lead you back to poetry, then?
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes.
It does.
You've written many different types. You've not jumped around, that sounds superficial.
I'm a dilettante.
You've progressed through many different forms and genres. And that made me think of one of the initial statements I made. Your primary academic background is in Romance languages. You've got a doctorate from Harvard. You specialized in French. But you're teaching English and not in French. What happened to the French?
Well, I dropped, as I said, I taught actually at MIT for 2 years, and then I dropped out of the academic world. At the time I decided to go back to teaching, I had been out of academics for a very long time, so the only job I could have conceivably gotten teaching French would have been mainly just teaching language and not literature. That was part of it.
In high school? Or
yeah, and I wanted to be able to teach literature. The other thing is I was kind of my own, again, sort of political values. I felt, it was more important for people to, that Americans needed to be able to use their own language and, read and write it better than they were being taught to do it. So I kind of wanted to be teaching in a community college, and I wanted to be teaching essentially what I thought people needed the most, which was English at that time. And now I'm so far away from French. My French is pretty rusty, and it would be very difficult, to get back. I could get back into it, but I don't know if I really want to. It seems like something.
So you think that the foreign language is almost a luxury in a country that's got only kind of a third world grasp on its own educational system?
That's right. That's right.
That's sad, but
people
true.
People are semi-literate in their own language, and that's where it's at.
I'd like to ask you something technical. You've brought some of the publications in which you've appeared. Sojourner is one in which I've been interested for some time. I knew one of the editors at one time. In fact, I might have had something in here one time.
Really?
I think I signed it Joan.
No.
I signed it Joan.
You did not. You creep. That's an old one.
This is an old Sojourner. Just to acquaint our audience with some of the publications in Susan's background. This is published in Cambridge or Boston?
It's actually, they just moved out of Cambridge and into Jamaica Plain.
And it's edited by women?
It's edited by women,
and written primarily by women.
That's right.
And I think it's at least 15 years old now, I think, something like that.
Yeah, it's been going for a long time. It's one of those publications that kind of grew out of the women's movement. It was originally out of some women at MIT, I think, and it was near MIT originally. And it's lasted. There are a few publications like that have lasted out of the movements of the 60s and 70s.
And its level of awareness, I think, has stayed high.
Yes, definitely. Which is what you can say for.
Well, we can't slam Ms.
This magazine,
if you've appeared in it.
So many changes. Well, Ms. Magazine stopped publishing fiction, and then, of course, as you know, it's been bought by... It essentially ceased publication and is now a kind of subscription magazine. I haven't seen the latest issues of it.
Who owns that now?
I'm not sure, to tell you the truth, what changes it's gone through.
I don't think... I'm not going to remember her name. She has nothing to do with it. Gloria
Yes,
Steinem has nothing to do. Does she?
I think
Is
she still does.
How did you get connected with Ms.? Did you send something to them cold?
I sent it to them cold, right. I sent it to them cold. I had sent them a story once before. This is the period when I was sending my fiction out, like everyone else does, pretty, without an agent, just sending things around. I had sent them a story and gotten no response, and, written to them, gotten no response. Finally, I called them, and they told me they had lost it. So I said, oh, gosh. So then I sent them this other story, and a friend of mine suggested that I send it to them, and I did send it to them. Same thing, I didn't hear for 3 months, 4 months, wrote them an angry, indignant letter, not angry, but indignant, saying, you really should be treating writers a little bit better, considering this is a woman's magazine. You're worse in your treatment of writers than many other more conventional magazines. And I got a call. One day I came home from school and I got this telephone call from this editor of Ms., completely out of the blue, apologizing and telling me that indeed they were going to publish my story, which I was just totally flabbergasted at. And I felt like I'd been asked to the prom, by the captain of the football team.
What piece? That's very sexist.
I know.
Gee,
I said that.
We'll edit that out.
I said that.
What piece was that?
It was a short story called My Exceptional Mom, which was actually the only story I've ever written from a male point of view. I decided to play around with the issue of point of view and try to write it from the point of view of a teenage young man who had grown up in feminist collectives among women who were all feminists and were constantly trying to sort of stomp out his masculinity.
I've read, yes.
And
there must be at least 10 people in the country who fit that description.
Well, I don't know. They liked it and they printed it. So, but it was inspired by a couple of real things that happened.
I just got the high sign from Brian that we have only 2 minutes left. So that means it's sort of a fairly quick wrap-up. It goes quickly.
Yeah, it does.
Our guests all receive a jar of whiteout, and our audience. This is our studio audience, and our studio audience is in this box, and they want to respond too. This is to thank you for appearing on the Writer's Block. I know you type on computers essentially, but
no, I do my poetry on a typewriter, and my longer pieces on a computer.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.
I'd like to thank everyone in our TV audience for being with us as well. If you've learned something about writing, learned something about the desire to write or go to movies from Susan, then the Writer's Block has been a great success. Thanks for being with us, and good night.